A word from our sponsors. Whether or not Google ever decides to deprecate cookies, they continue to loom over us, putting future revenue growth in doubt. LiveIntent's Hero, Helping Identity Reveal Opportunity, offers a solution by transforming non-addressable audiences into addressable inventory using first-party data. Hero is scalable, interoperable, and integrated with major industry players, providing a robust framework for navigating the post-cookie era. See how Hero can help you quickly unlock your inventory at LiveIntent/Hero. That's LiveIntent/HIRO. This is a disclosure. Please note that all guests featured on the AdTechGod pod are invited to participate. They do not pay in any form to appear on the show. However, guests may be sponsors of the AdTechGod community, the AdTech Forum, or other product offerings. Welcome to the AdTechGod pod, your window into the world of advertising technology and the people behind it. I'm your host, AdTechGod. Welcome back to today's episode of the AdTechGod pod, where we bring you insightful conversations with industry leaders and experts. Today, we have a special guest who has a wealth of experience and knowledge to share with us. Joining us is CJ Leonard, a seasoned professional in the media and digital space. With a career spanning several years, CJ has worked with some of the most prestigious companies in the field, including CBS, NBC Universal, Telaria, Iris TV, and more. Her diverse background and consultative approach makes her a valuable guest on today's show. I'm looking forward to getting to know her. I've actually had the pleasure of meeting CJ in the past, and even though she doesn't remember, I'm thrilled to have her here to share her journey, experiences, and wisdom with us all. CJ, welcome to the AdTechGod pod.
Thank you, ATG. I am so excited to be on with you today.
Thank you. I'm equally just as excited, and thanks so much for being here and taking time out of your day.
No, thank you.
You've obviously worked at some amazing, broadcast companies like CBS and NBC, but what brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, I know. So I've been in the industry since I was in radio in college, 2001, 2002, and thought I would be working in local television. Even going back, thought I'd be a TV producer in LA. And 20 years later, I've run ops teams in New York. And there's someone that once told me that is the same thing. And I thank them for that since of all the student loan bills I paid. But very different worlds. I thought I'd be in TV production, be a line producer 20 years ago. I worked in local TV and radio from, Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania to Philadelphia. I was in local television. I've done every local TV station job you can do in the TV industry outside the newsroom. And so I wound up getting an opportunity to come up to New York. My manager at the time, Susie Meehan, which we've been working together now 15 plus years in some capacity over 3 different tours of duty. She brought me to New York and was at CBS Local for 4 years. I've done basically a lot of jobs on the supply side, from CMS to working at Telaria, working on supply side platforms, being the publisher that's sitting in the muck of all that technology, kind of done it all on the supply side. And I did it so long that I thought I should be telling other people what to do and I should go get into consulting. So consulting, I got into it directly about 1.5 years ago, but had been wanting to do this for about 5 years and more project work. I had seen the insides of, the biggest media companies in the world and wanted to take my show on the road. And I did it on my own last year for about 10 months as Mad Leo Consulting. And now, moving forward with other media companies coming up.
How did you feel the transition was moving from, a company like CBS or NBC where, you're the publisher or the content distributor, broadcaster, and then moving into kind of an ad tech company like Telaria on the supply side platform piece? Was that a major transition for you? Did you feel like that was a huge change in the way you think about supply? Or did you feel like it was very natural and organic for you to move?
I felt like it was organic. I had been at CBS twice and Tribune, and then I moved into that company called World Now. It was Frankly Media, and then I think they've done another merger. But going from I am the person influencing and dictating the conversation with the vendor to being the vendor, that was an interesting change back in 2014 when I did that. I've kind of danced between publisher, vendor over the years. And I think one of the things going specifically to Telaria, I'm a big believer that, you have to understand the other side of the wall. You have to understand, all parts of the system, not in detail necessarily, but if you don't understand where all the handshakes are and so forth, you're not maximizing your value. And so it was interesting when I went to Telaria, after a couple of months, I was like, God, I wish people would have told me this when I was at the publisher side. I might not have caused them as many headaches. I think one of the big advantages in my job hops, so to speak, is it's always been a natural progression. And I love connecting the dots between the two different conversations. It's, understanding, having done some of these jobs or worked with some of the people that I've worked with internally and now being a consultant, I think it's really helpful to know where someone sits on the floor and, what their day's like and what they're battling, whether it's operative one or GAM or freewheel or, you could talk that level of lingo and then also take it into to the processes and what their day to day is like. And I think that's where I really enjoy and thrive and have done both sides. And I did the transition early in my career. So I was, 30 then going into World Now. So again, made this jump a few times between the two. And I think again, it's, you can only know so much, but I think if you want to have that general aesthetic, it's good to know how all the parts connect.
One of the hardest things I'm finding overall is I post polls pretty often on, X or on LinkedIn. And I don't always share the results because I value people's privacy, obviously, as a semi-anonymous account. And it's shocking because I think I asked the other day, maybe actually a few weeks ago, who controls the actual inventory? And I think I put DSP, SSP, publisher, and I put a DMP and just threw that out there just for fun to see if anybody would pick it. And everybody said, and I think I put ad server. And I think a lot of people were actually putting DSP. They're like, oh, the DSP controls the inventory for the publisher. I'm like, that's actually not true. And it mostly came from DSPs, to be honest. So the DSPs were like, no, we have control of the inventory. I'm like, you actually don't. The publisher does through their ad server. So it was quite shocking. And I think it's so important with people like you who understand the supply side of things, like how the publisher works, how the ad server works, how the SSP works. It's actually really rare that people in the industry know that full flow from, supply all the way to, brand.
Absolutely.
And so I love your background. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the piece too, right? Because you're the most important when you're doing a job or you're in a company, that your job or your company are the most important thing in that conversation, right? When I was at CBS, I was the biggest advocate for CBS. Then I got to World Now and I had someone tell me that I was a tough one to work with. And I was shocked by the comment. They had heard it secondhand. I had been an advocate for my company at the time, and now would be an advocate for World Now. But I think what happens is, going back to your comment there, you think you are the center of the universe, and you're not. There's a huge daisy chain that if you're at the DSP, I could sit here now and probably diagnose a problem that you're seeing in the DSP, just looking at data and so forth, because I did a lot of this at Iris, looking at the data, going upstream and going, okay, well, wait a minute, that probably failed because of X, Y, and Z reasons in the ad server or the SSP. And I think that being able to do those types of diagnostics, I think is, if you don't look beyond yourself and your system's not perfect. I have gone into conversations saying, this CMS instance, this, our version of X, Y, and Z we're good. I've been told I'm wrong, right? In operations, just generally speaking, you're always on defense in operations, right? Sure, it's the ads issue 5 out of 10 times, but I think that's a great piece about being in operations is that the world does not center around you. I'm not that self-centered, but I do think that when you're in an operations role, you're the one either having to diagnose your own problems or going and showing where else the holes are, that it's not you or it's not just you. And I think that's the great thing about operations is that you can, that physical, crossing guard in the conversation, you're able to redirect folks that, they say, oh, DSP is the center of the universe. Well, actually, everyone's the center of the universe. Here's where your problems are.
I think that's a big part of it too. I think people who work on supply side assume that all the controls they have in place are the controls that are needed for the whole universe. But there's so many controls that are happening outside of their world.
Even the publisher side, you think you control, and then you don't understand auction dynamics, or you don't understand where signals drop off. I could go and send out from SpringServe to Magnite and another SSP, XYZ signals, and then them not be seen by the DSP. Well, was that a DSP problem, not picking it up? Was that the SSP not sending it correctly? Did you actually, set up the tags? I mean, I can't believe now, 20 years later, we're still working with tags, or 15 years later.
That's so true. I have you that has like a really good ad ops background. I had Jared Wilashinsky from Paramount as well. I have someone coming from Univision next month. And it's like, I actually enjoy the conversations with ad ops kind of pros, people who really understand the inner workings, because it's such a different perspective, because you do get so granular. Like, you understand the actual flow of the tech rather than, kind of a sales level or even like a product level. I think ad operations people are really good for the foundation of it all, which is why I actually like asking people who know ad ops to the podcast.
Well, and just to that point though, too, I think one of the things about being an ad ops for so long, and Jared's great at synthesizing up and down, but I think one of the things that when you get into ad ops, you have to understand everything at such a root level. One of the things as a consultant that I'm trying to work on is my level of articulation up into what you were saying, the sales or product level, not just understanding, but being able to present that storyline in a succinct way for that audience. Because when you're down in the trenches all the time, I think there's a level of articulation, not that you lose, but you don't get to work on. You don't get to flex that muscle that often in a lot of cases. I've been called a fixer, great fixer. When there's a problem, call CJ. But what I'm not known for and what I'm working on, as part of my brand is just the strategic aspects. When you're talking about strategy, that's when I want people to call me in. And yes, I could talk to the nth degree of context bid signals, with the IAB, but at the highest levels of how do I move this forward over the next 5 years and what's the strategy for my business? That's something that I think ad ops folks, we are great at so many things, but we have to work on those muscles if we want to move up especially with automation and AI coming into the picture. I think to advance our careers and stay relevant, that's where we have to strengthen ourselves if we're not already in that muscle around, articulating to other audiences outside of our ad ops group or our planning group and direct managers.
So do you think it's moving out of like more of the tactical mentality into more of a strategic mentality? Because that's really where I guess career growth comes from, and individual branding comes from. Is look, I understand the tactical aspect of fixing an issue, but I also understand how to strategically move things forward for the future.
Yeah, I make the analogy. It's like Easy Pass coming to the tolls, right? It's with every job that's out there now, there's advancements that come. And I think one of the things, if you're an ad ops person now, at any level, looking at your relevance over the next 10, I'm 41, so I've got a good 25 years to go, right, before retirement. How am I going to stay relevant over the next, couple decades? I think you have to understand not only the strategy aspect, but where you can utilize technology to make sure that you stay relevant as well as strategy, right? So it's not just sitting there going, I'm going to, I understand GAM inside and out. That's great. It's only going to sustain us for so long.
So where do you think things are going? And I guess your strategic vision and the way you are involved, where do you think the industry's heading in terms of specific technologies or consumer behavior or even, streaming habits, et cetera?
I think I'm really concerned more so with all these things that took such a manual effort for so long. I was just talking to someone recently about how do you query your research data or your ad server data with natural language processing. Just getting those insights out. What I'm looking forward to over the next couple of years, and having been in the AWS booth with them and NAB, and I was at Iris TV context company, context data pipeline, data platform. I was with them for 2 years, as well as having, bootstrap some of their work at Telaria from the corp strategy side. So I've seen context, 3+ years. And I was in the booth NAB, and they've got solutions like ad break detection. They've got solutions like convergence. One I was excited about was context, because if you're sitting on AWS, they have the technology now to sit there and scan all of your assets in, I don't remember offhand the exact timing, but in moments, not minutes, it's not a 7-minute video getting scanned in real time. It's assets getting scanned in moments 30 seconds for an episode or something like that. And it's got all the IAB GARM segments that they would categorize that at, because Amazon's abilities are getting so much more advanced that they're able to do that without, having to do integrations. If you're already sitting on their CDN, you don't have to do all the integrations we were doing at Iris. So again, people have to connect all those dots together, but just seeing that scanning element, having seen Veritone do it 5-7 years ago, having seen the advents that have happened with context with the other data companies that Iris works with, it was exciting to kind of see how turnkey that may be becoming, and that they're, going back to the context element, how fast that has, we look at things like overnight successes, and it's like context has been around forever. So I think context more, I talked to a couple companies and context is becoming more and more of a conversation, but it still has years to go. Coming into this career, I thought that technology was going to be a lot faster. And then I find, don't be scared of anything, because it's going to take a minute. You have time to prepare, right? And I think context is going to get there, but not yet.
I feel like, contextual targeting has been around obviously for a really long time, maybe not in the streaming world. But now I think with technology catching up and being able to evaluate the content, like there's a lot of companies out there that are utilizing that for better targeting and better reporting on the back end after serving campaigns. So for me too, I think contextual is really important, especially when it comes to streaming, since we don't really have any cookies. We're using alternate types of IDs to try to, target users. But really, like across the board, I think contextual will be really strong. And I think it's not just contextual targeting. I think it's contextual, layered with some AI functionality and capabilities. The speed to be able to scan those images and those videos quickly and turn around and spit out some sort of content signal is also, just technological advancements. And I love kind of reading the news and seeing companies leaning into the combination of those two things of AI and context. Because to me, it's like, that is the future. And it may be the near future for, streaming television, since we don't have cookies, but it's going to be the future for everything that is dependent on cookies, because we're going to find another way to target outside of just, some sort of ID.
Agreed. And I think also too, with the context element there, I came from NBC News, right? So on the display side, you had companies like Admantix that's now with IAS and Grape Shot, early days. And you had those vendors for that on text, but because video, I'm so happy that technology has caught up, because now with video, you could scan that at a pace that would allow it to be, you realize the same benefits of what you would have seen on display 7 years ago. I used to have panic wake ups at 2 a.m. There'd be an email saying, hey, there was a plane crash, take down this, airlines ads for the week, things like that. And you didn't have to worry about it on display, but you had to worry about it on video. And that's just a, early days career conversation, but like just seeing the technology advance, the iPhone wasn't out when I got out of grad school, right? And now look at where we've been. So just seeing the progression of the technology for that is one of the things that excites me.
What do you feel like, you talked about waking up at night worried that there was some sort of ad running next to content that's not, brand safe, or, they don't want association with it. But what does keep you up at night the most in regards to advertising or ad tech in general? I
think that we're hiding in plain sight at this point. I think with the way that and what I mean by that is just as a consumer. And so what keeps me up at night is, why I appreciate context as well. I think this is more of a personal, we work in this industry, and I'm a big believer in what we do, right? And how we do it. But at the same time, some of the data collection practices and some of the ways that an ad might find me, it's what technology's out there that, combining different elements that maybe I'm not as comfortable with, and understanding that signal though, and how many parties could be involved with that signal getting to one place. I feel like I'm just kind of hiding in plain sight. And, we talk about hashing things and so forth, and it's privacy safe. But even context, if you sat there and tied the context value to some other identifier, there's some crazy stuff that people could do with this information. And I think we're all wholeheartedly doing it for the sake of the advertisers and just to get the right product to the right person at the right time. But I think, there's a lot of data that just sits out there on AWS and other servers out there. And you just wonder how much of that, it's the unknown, right? I think my biggest issue right now is the privacy element and the unknown, right? If you get a nefarious character in there, what could they actually have on a person?
I think the privacy piece is really important because obviously we have legal changes that are happening constantly. But I also think it's just the creepiness factor of it. Like people who don't work in our industry are like, how do they know that I was on this site? And how do they know that I'm interested in buying this? And how are they suggesting these products to me outside of the website that we visited? And I just kind of like laugh in a weird way, like, oh, you have no idea. Because sometimes we know and sometimes we don't know, like where that's coming from. And I wish there was an easy way to track it down to say, hey, I know that, you were able to be served this ad on a different device outside. But like, unless you're really in the nitty gritty of it all and can really dig down deep, like it's almost impossible to find out unless you have access to what you need to see it.
And I don't think anyone goes in, when I went to PrivacyCon 2019, and when the academics were talking about privacy, it was interesting because they obviously hadn't seen the inside of an ad server or an SSP, right? And so like, I think as people are legislating for these things, I think, and I know there are groups that are going down in DC and I know Beeler's group went down in the last couple of years and there are folks advocating there, but I think there's a realistic approach to how you go about cleaning that up or monitoring it. And I just hope that, someone once said, it's not the actual legislation that's going to be the killer. It's the threat of legislation. I heard that at a conference in the last year. And that threat of legislation, I think, I think if you give the ad tech industry, what you want, that we're going to figure it out, right? But I think because they don't have enough people involved, at least in the US, the bifurcated, standards that they're trying to come up with, you need a clearer plan.
So obviously the industry's both, in my perspective, I guess, am I out of it now? I guess now that I am like in media, I don't know what I do.
You're omniscient. Today. I thought you're
I don't know what I'm
so
on. I don't even know. I don't even know anymore. I ask myself that every day. Like, oh, I work in ad tech. I'm like, but do I? My question is like, how do you keep, a check on your happiness, and how do you keep a check on just making sure that this industry and your work and your surroundings and your friends and coworkers are happy? Like, how do you make sure that you wake up every morning and you're excited to go to work? Because I know I am now. Like, I love what I'm doing now full time. Like, this is amazing. But how do you check in and measure on your happiness?
I think one of the things, I lived in New York for 11 years and I love New York. But when you get on that hamster wheel and then you get off of it, you start realizing the things that maybe you're missing that New York doesn't offer, right? I had a wonderful life in New York and then COVID hit and I never thought I would move back to Philadelphia. And now I own a house 2 streets over from my parents. I got a dog. I'm out with friends I haven't seen. I didn't get to see that often. It was just a WhatsApp group. I still see my friends in New York. I'm going up frequently, but I think one of the things I don't know about waking up every day. I think I tend to wake up and just, all right, what are we doing today? I don't necessarily check in with myself, but I do think that especially when I was in New York, I was not doing that at all. And I would just run as hard as I could at any one thing and I wouldn't check in. And I think I'm paying the consequences now for that. And so anyone listening, I think, to that question, like, do check in with yourself on a daily or weekly basis, because I didn't for years. And I thought I was going to all the happy hours and I was working and I'd be eating halal guys, outside of CBS at 1 a.m. because I just finished, working on getting campaigns live for the quarter. Like, I've slept under my desk. I think if you're doing that, take a day off I would suggest. And burnout, you don't check in with yourself and it leads to burnout. And you can't fix burnout in a week or 2 on a vacation or a staycation. I took 6 weeks off from a job. I did part-time and then full off and then 2 weeks part-time coming back in. And I thought that got me through another 6 months. It didn't get me through the rest of the job. And that's where consulting, I again, coming out of that ops world, I feel like project work where you hyper-focus for a period of time on certain things and you complete them and then you start again. I feel like that's maybe where my personality or where my usefulness is now, because I like to, this isn't like when we're in high school and, there's semesters or college where there's, quarters and semesters where something ends. We're in this, you're in the job and you have to find your ends, right? You have to find your breaks. And AdOps is definitely one of those career tracks where unless you change companies, you're moving widgets. And in some companies, that's all you're doing, right? I've worked at big and small companies, right? I've worked at companies where I was an admin on the systems and I talked to everyone in the organization. I've worked at other companies where I was told to stay in my lane. You're doing really good. Just focus in on, getting these campaigns live or just managing these people. I think I thrive in organizations where I have my hands in more cookie jars. And at some point I was like, well, consulting has the best of all those worlds. So let's go do that. And to your point about happiness, I think contentment, sometimes you just have to settle on contentment. And I think that's where I'm at now, because I think you endeavor into something new like consulting and you're learning something new every day. It's a great kind of uncomfortableness.
A lot of what you said resonated with me personally. So I think you're right. I think burnout is real. I think a week off doesn't help. I know people who are burned out, and there are people that I've spoken to just recently, like 2 weeks ago. I had a friend of mine that I'm very close with kind of tell me, I don't even know what's going on. Sometimes I feel like I'm unappreciated. Sometimes I feel like I'm constantly staring at a screen and I contribute so much and I'm never recognized. I'm kind of over it. And you can just sense it in their voice. And they're like, I'm going to take a couple days off. I'm like, no, I actually think you need like a few weeks off. Like you need a total mental reset because you've been in it for so many years at this point. Like you need to take time to yourself and just get like mentally healthy and positive. Or you take 4 days off and you're going to come right back in on Monday and you're going to feel like crap. Like it's not going to solve anything. 3-4 days doesn't do it.
That was also last year when I started a consulting business. I eased into it because I knew that I had some health stuff that had come up. We said COVID, everyone, we just all got through. It's amazing how people forget. We were just in a pandemic 4 years ago. So I think that's another element too, where the ripple effects of the pandemic, working from home, not having human contact. I try to go to New York as much as I can. I'm trying to find local office space that I can pop into, like a WeWork. Like I need human connection. I'm definitely an extrovert. I think, if you're sitting at home and you're working remotely, I love being home with my dog and at some days, but I need some recharge. And that's where going to New York, it does that for me, right? I go for a day or two. I'm recharged. I'm good for like 2 weeks. But you got to find that if your thing's human connection and you're sitting home all day, that's another element too. Like, what are your surroundings? Are they working for you or against you?
Look, the human element is huge. I think that's a huge part of why I created the community to start with. And then obviously I had a party in Miami to celebrate what I thought was, like, hey, like I made it. Like somehow I pulled this off. Like I was able to do this. And now I'm having another one, at Advertising Week, which I haven't mentioned on any podcast until today. So like there is an element of community and there is an element of the human touch and just being able to, stand there with a beverage in your hand and talk to someone and meet with someone outside of just an office environment. And people do forget that we were all locked up for quite some time and it affects people differently. Some did really well with it. Some created better bonds with their family. Some, it destroyed their families. And it just really depends on how the human element and the networking element plays a role in your happiness in life. And so, I love hearing that you pop into the city and try to find a WeWork so that you can interact with people. And that's kind of what I do today is I pop in and I see various people regularly. So CJ, that actually brings us to the end of this podcast. And I wanted to thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I can't thank you enough. This has been such a good time spending with you, ATG.
Same here. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the AdTechGod Pod, a podcast for the people about the people that make AdTech great. Stay connected with me for more insights, trends, and interviews in the realm of AdTech. Don't miss out on our latest updates, so follow me on X, Instagram, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't forget, ATG Slack community has insights, networking opportunities, and jobs. Keep the conversation going and stay at the forefront of AdTech innovation.